Hey everybody, it's me, Bryce. Just wanted to kind of make a little video. I want to introduce something that I've been working on for a while, and I have some people who are helping me. And I want to post something on YouTube. Sorry if the walls are a little barren and everything. We just got into the new house, and so I'm hoping to have a little bit of a better setup here soon, so I have a more appealing space. Because right now all I got is this blank wall, an empty room full of magic cards right now because I've been doing some organizing, so I don't take up an entire room of stuff. But I wanted to introduce my kind of writing idea, but I have a hard time kind of just writing in sentences and full-on descriptions of everything. So I decided I wanted to take on the opportunity to try and make a tabletop role-playing game. I love to play D&D, and I love to play Call of Cthulhu. I've tried a couple other different systems like Monster of the Week and Powered by the Apocalypse, and I had a lot of fun with those. And I thought I might not be really good at writing an actual story out on paper because my brain doesn't function like that, but I might be able to put the key points in and have a nice base setting, and then let other people build off my story, because I really like the idea of a collaborative work, and that's what I really enjoy about D&D, especially from different streamers such as the Adventure Zone or Critical Role. They've added whole other layers to the game because their stories just took what the base game gives you and they added so much more to it. And so my project is called Fractured Divinity, and I'm just going to give kind of a small synopsis, and I'll leave some other videos in the future kind of describing what places, things, and stuff in the world to kind of hopefully get some buzz around it, and so people can tell me what they think. So the idea of the world is it's a world of my creation. I'm no H.R.R. Tolkien or Patrick Rothfuss or Brandon Sanderson, but I do really like that fantasy, but more on the sci-fi cosmic level of stuff. So I get a lot of inspiration from them as writers, but as far as my stories take place, I get a lot of inspiration from things like Marvel and DC, a lot of inspiration from H.P. Lovecraft. I love Lovecraftian horror. And so I really like to play on that. A big focus in my world is its deities and the people that they praise. The reason why it's called Fractured Divinity is in the beginning of time and everything in existence, there was one being that stood above all. They created everything, they brought life and everything to the universe. However, when they did this, they split themselves into 5 separate pieces. And each pieces ruled over specific domains, if you will, of our mortal realm. But they all technically have the same power. So I get a lot of questions about this because I talk about how they have physical forms, and I'll kind of describe this a little bit later. But the idea is they all have the same power, but they're just not as proficient in one aspect of that power. And so the idea is there are 5 aspects that were brought into the universe, and that's space, time, energy, consciousness, and matter. Matter is the one who created all the planets and all the living all the living creatures and everything. Space is what brought the space between everything and the ability to actually populate a place with matter. Time, of course, brought time to the universe, making things move forward and being able to progress. Consciousness brought thought to living things. And while a lot of times people are like, well, is that really an element of the universe? I mean, I think it is, and I think it's a really cool concept in my head, especially how I have it planned. And then last but not least is energy, and energy, of course, gives energy to all the living things. Things are able to actually move throughout the space they were given. It has all that kind of potential. But the thing that I have that I think is a little different than most stories is I think physical beings that are gods are less interesting. And this is what I mean. So, this is where probably the cosmic horror kind of stuff comes in. I really like the idea of a deity that's basically slumbering, but could end all things, but might not because they just don't feel like it, kind of thing. And I really liked that idea, and I wanted to run with it. However, I didn't want to steal straight from H.P. Lovecraft and be like, I have these really monstrous looking creatures that just roam the universe every once in a while, and sometimes life ends. So what I did is I made these sentient places, and I'll kind of explain a little bit. This video is probably going to be on a little bit of a longer side, and some of my future videos will be shorter, and we'll go and deep dive into specific topics, like one of the specific gods, or one of the specific races or planets or anything like that. And they'll be much shorter, and it'll just be nice content so people watch, see what the world's like, and see if they're interested. But I'm kind of just giving an overall broad synopsis of everything, which is a little hard to do, and I had an elevator pitch, and I think it would have worked pretty nicely, but I wanted to also have a little bit of meat to the content, so I'm also kind of explaining things, so bear with me. Anyway, these sentient places, they're like the gods, except they exist outside of reality, or outside of our mortal realm. For example, we have the garden. The garden is a place that is where all life is created, and after life has been tested and put through trials and matured enough, they send it out into the known universe. And then I have 5 others, and these places, they all have names. So I have the garden, the void, the tower, the reef, and the pit. Now, each of them rules over their specific place. So the garden is matter, the void is space, the reef is energy, the pit is consciousness, and the tower is time. I took inspiration from a lot of different places. I thought gardens are tended to and produce a lot of living things, so that makes a pretty good jump over. I've had people ask me like, well, because gardens are tended to, wouldn't garden or like something like the forest or something like that be a much better name for it? The idea though is that this being was created by a much higher being because it's part of the much higher being. And so for a place to be tended like that, it almost makes it as a foreshadow to a higher being. And I really thought that was a cool idea. Now the void is over space, like I was talking about, and each of them have their own physical forms, like a body. However, when they are in their body, the body has limits. They can't produce as much power as they would as if they were in their original conscious state, which is the place that they are bound to. But the bodies have different representations. The bodies only actually last a few years because they cannot withstand the power of the god. And so, for example, a body only lasts 5 years, and they can make it look and be as mature or have any desired appearance that they want. They're pretty much gods. They can create anything, like I said. However, and this is where I'm kind of getting into more of the plot synopsis, and this is what I want to bring to people to hopefully draw them in. The plot is one of the 5 gods is evil. Not really evil, but isn't what you would call a good being. Because the thing is gods can't inherently be evil, because gods are basically the will of the living. And so it's hard to call something evil and something bad in my universe, because each individual has their reason, each individual has their thought process, and that's one thing I like to dive into, is that morality and ethics kind of question, where it's like, is this a really good idea or a really bad idea? Or maybe if I was in this person's circumstances, I would do this. So the idea is the pit, when scattered, said that he would help create, they don't have genders. I keep saying he for some of them, because some past ideas, I did have them as beings, and this was a man, or primarily depicted as a man. But the pit, it came into existence and said, hey, I will help, I will create everything, just know that I am completely against all of it. And when everything is created, I will destroy it. And the reason why it did this is when it was a part of the higher being wanted, but also didn't want people to inhabit its space. And so within the consciousness, the conscious part of it that was saying, I don't want people in my territory, or I don't want people inhabiting my world or my realm or whatever, the pit took, and that's all it had. Everybody else had different... Hey! Sorry, my dogs are barking now, and I don't know why. I'm going to close the door. However, what made this a very unique experience for, I think, the other gods is they didn't have that consciousness added to their or spread among themselves. So they decided, we need to split, because you can't kill a god in my universe, especially one of this caliber. So what they did is they split the pit into 4 separate pieces, and they each stored a piece of the pit within their realm. There was the voice of the pit, which was stored within the reef, the heart of the pit, which was stored within the garden, the mind of the pit, which was stored within the tower, and the will of the pit, which was stored within the void. Now, the pit ended up kind of taking a rebranding, if you will, because this place basically was cut off from all the other gods in the whole known universe, because it had been split into 4 kind of pieces and then sealed within each other and within the other gods. However, the pit took on a new name, which was the corruption, because if somebody or a mortal being was to come into contact with this area, they would have found themselves a large, almost monastery or temple of sorts, but this temple is crafted of flesh, bone, and rotting materials, because the pit had a very macabre and disgusting look when you were in the pit. And I can get into that when I dive into, profiles of these places. However, I thought this was very interesting because it would make it so the pit still had ways to reach out to the mortals, because it was still there and it was still sealed, but the seal wasn't perfect, because you have to think, this seal wasn't like actually putting it away in a time and space locked prison, because they aren't able to do that. They're still, even though they are gods, they would all have to work together, and unfortunately, as much as they are gods, they bicker just like mortals. And so they all have their disagreements, and for example, the void believes we have too much matter in the universe and wants to start deleting things because it feels it's too crowded. The tower kind of agrees, but is more of the non-biased opinion that's kind of on both sides of the argument. And the reef doesn't even care for mortal existence. They just did it because they felt they had to. And it wasn't because they felt they had to because of a greater being. They just felt they didn't have anything better to do, so that's what they're going to do. Anyway, that was the long side of things. The short, and probably the part I'll cut into a separate video as well, just for a quick synopsis. The pit is tempting mortals. It's trying to sway them to his side, or its side, sorry. That way it can escape from its prison and end mortality. So then it and its other beings can reform into the great big one, kind of. I don't have a name for it yet, so it's kind of hard to decide. I don't want to take too much from like Marvel or DC, or even too much from some of the Lovecraftian things I go for. So I don't want to call it like a great old one, or I don't want to call it the one above all. And I know DC has its thing, but I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. But so I haven't really come with a good name yet. I kind of was thinking, because I really like the simplicity of my gods' names, as far as like the garden, the void, the pit, the reef, and the tower. They're very basic, so I really liked kind of going for a simple name, like the primary, or something like the alpha, but I know the alpha is also used a lot in religion and stuff, and so I don't really want to go through that either. I want to have something fairly unique. But the idea is, in the tabletop, the party will go through the game encountering people who have either been turned or swayed by the pit, and they either have to stop them or they can join in. I want this to be a unique experience where it's not necessarily you have to make the choice of, oh, the pit is evil, the pit is bad, this is how we're going to do it. You could follow the pit for all I care. I think it would make a very interesting storyline. That way the game master could go in and say, fine, this is actually kind of cool. I get to watch as the heroes fight the villains this time. And I get to play the heroes while they play the villains. Or you could do it vice versa. Or you don't even have to follow that. The world is expansive. That's the idea. I talked a lot about my gods today, but I have so many ideas about the things. Whereas I have many different races. Each race has a different cultural structure. They've got interesting layouts and environments that they live upon. And there are plenty of places to go. There are lots to explore and lots of creatures to be found. I tend to sway towards the divine stuff because that's where I've put a lot of my work when I talk about my project. And I know this is a long video, and I know I'm not going to get maybe a ton of views, but I really wanted to bring it out and talk about it. And I'll come out with more videos later talking about in-depth content about these things. Specifically, I think my first video is going to be about the garden and talking about what the garden means and what it means to me as well. I'll kind of scatter it around, so I'm not just talking about gods for like a few weeks or just talking about a race or a planet for a few weeks. I'm going to try and keep it spread out, so I'll start with the god and then maybe do a few races and then a planet or something, or maybe, I don't know how I'm going to do it yet. I have a project going with some people that I'm working with on Discord. They're really awesome and I really enjoy all of their company, and they've been really great help to the whole project. I used to think I could do this all by myself, and if I could part any advice to those who maybe listened to the whole video, it's fine to ask for help, and it's even better to work together. Two heads are better than one. I've really enjoyed working with them. I've gotten more maps done than I would have ever gotten done just by myself because I have people who like to make maps, and that's awesome to me. I have plenty of people who are helping me write. I haven't had a lot of opportunity to give them the chance to write stuff yet because I just haven't had the time with all the moving. I'm trying to get things set up to a point where I have a foundation where people can build off the foundation. That's what I want. That's what I think would be awesome. As much as I'd love to call this my child and my project, I can't because I want this to be collaborative. As much as I think a lot of writers, and I can tell you this because I know a few, would like to have their stuff recognized as their own. And while I would like to be seen as maybe the creator and maybe the forefront of it, I don't want to be seen as the only face of Fractured Divinity. I want it to be seen as a team of people because this team is very important to me. Recently, I haven't been able to put out a lot of stuff for them to work with because of my move. And like I said, and you can tell, everything is pretty barren. I'm at the new house kind of all by myself, and I don't really have Wi-Fi at the moment. And so I'm working off of 5G, which isn't horrible, but I'm out of hotspot data too, so I can't really use my computer anymore. Or not as effectively, I should say. I still can use it, it's just at a much slower speed. So I'm hoping that within the next month or month and a half, I'll have a much better setup. This room, and I can even do a separate video on this, I want to have it decked out and decorated. And this is my office space. I'm not in my bedroom right now. We have a kind of a bunch of random stuff in here at the moment. I've been using this as a headquarters kind of. I said in the beginning, I've been sorting magic cards. big collection requires a little bit more thought when I put it away. So I'm trying to condense it all down into some smaller boxes, or even just into some containers like this. Ugh, big and heavy. That way I'm not taking up as much space. Anyway, I really want to thank you for anybody who did watch the whole video. I know I can kind of ramble, and that's what makes my videos kind of long. But I'm really excited to bring this to kind of light and have people talk about it. And whether or not it gains a lot of traction or whether or not it doesn't, I'm still happy about it. This has been an awesome project that I've been working on, that I've been having a ton of fun making. And I'm so glad I've had a lot of people who've decided that they want to be a part of it. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.